Have you ever stared at your phone, wondering how someone who claimed to care about you can suddenly go silent? No calls, no texts, not even a quick busy today message. That drop in communication can feel like a punch in the chest. It makes you question everything. Did I say something wrong? Did he lose interest? Is he talking to someone else? Did he ever really care? Before your mind spirals, stop. His silence is not the end of the story, and it doesn't mean what you fear. In fact, the way you respond in this moment can shift everything in your favor. Most women unknowingly make the one mistake that pushes him even further away. But today, you're not going to make that mistake. You're going to learn something he never expected you to know. Here's the truth. When a man pulls away, he's not always losing interest. Sometimes he's overwhelmed. Sometimes he's processing. Sometimes he's testing the emotional temperature of the connection. And sometimes he's taking your energy for granted because he assumes you'll always be there waiting. This is the moment where most women start chasing, over-explaining, or trying to fix things, completely changing the way he sees them. But you're about to do the exact opposite. You're about to activate the psychological trigger that makes him realize your value, miss your presence, and feel the urge to reach out first. If he can go days without talking to you, this video is your turning point. You're going to understand his silence on a deeper level, reclaim your emotional power, and learn how to shift the dynamic without games, without manipulation, and without abandoning your self-worth. Take a breath. You're about to see exactly why his silence isn't rejection. It's an opportunity, and it begins right now. When a man suddenly goes quiet, it's easy to assume the worst. Your mind fills in the blanks with fears, assumptions, and worst-case scenarios. But his silence actually carries very specific meanings, and none of them are as simple as he doesn't care. In fact, male silence often reveals more about his internal world than it does about you. Many men aren't wired to process emotions through words the way women do. When something feels confusing, overwhelming, or emotionally charged, they tend to pull back in order to sort through their own thoughts. Silence becomes their version of "I need a moment," not necessarily "I'm done with you." Another important truth is that men often retreat when they feel a loss of control. If he's catching unexpected feelings, if he's afraid of being vulnerable, or if your connection is triggering insecurities he hasn't dealt with, his instinct may be to step back. This doesn't mean he's losing interest. It means he's recalibrating his emotional comfort zone. It's not pretty, it's not logical, but it's real. There's also the possibility that he's testing the energy between you without consciously realizing it. Men sometimes withdraw to see how much you'll chase, how available you'll be, or whether you'll hold your own boundaries. If he thinks you'll always reach out first, always smooth things over, always close the gap, then your value becomes predictable. Something he assumes will always be there. Silence becomes a subtle gauge of how much effort he needs to put in. And sometimes, his silence is simply routine. Life gets busy, stress builds, priorities shift, and communication drops. Not because he's replacing you, but because he compartmentalizes. Men tend to focus intensely on one thing at a time, and emotional connection doesn't always stay at the top of the list. But here's the part most people miss. His silence doesn't hurt the connection. Your reaction to his silence does. If you over-pursue, panic, or demand answers, he feels pressured. If you pull back, maintain your energy, and stay grounded, he begins to feel the absence of your presence, often far more intensely than you expect. His silence has meaning, but it is not a verdict. It is information, not rejection. And once you understand what it really signals, you start responding in ways that draw him closer instead of pushing him further away. When a man begins to pull away, it rarely starts with a dramatic shift. It's usually subtle. A slower reply, a shorter message, a little less energy in his tone. By the time you notice it, he's already been wrestling with something internally. The psychology behind this withdrawal is layered, and most of it has nothing to do with you personally. Men are taught, both socially and emotionally, to manage discomfort by withdrawing rather than communicating. When something feels too intense, whether it's emotional closeness, pressure, fear of disappointment, or even unexpected attachment, the instinctive response is distance. Not because he wants to lose you, but because he wants to make sense of what he's feeling without being watched or judged. Another piece of this psychology comes from how men experience emotional overload. While women tend to move toward connection when something feels off, men often move away. It's a coping mechanism that helps them reclaim a sense of control. When he starts feeling vulnerable, or like the relationship could change his life in ways he wasn't prepared for, he may step back just to catch his breath. This pause isn't about abandoning the connection. It's about managing the intensity of it. There's also a deeper, almost primal layer. Men retreat to evaluate. He assesses his feelings, the level of commitment he's ready for, and the expectations he senses from you. If he's unsure of his ability to meet those expectations, his instinct might be to create space while he figures out whether he can rise to them. This internal audit can make him seem cold or distant, but internally he's sorting through fear, desire, responsibility, and readiness. And then there's ego, something few talk about openly. When a man doesn't feel like he's winning, succeeding, or impressing you, pulling away becomes a shield. He distances himself to avoid feeling inadequate. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid I'm not enough," he simply becomes quiet. What you need to remember is that his pulling away is often about his internal conflict, not your worth. His silence is an emotional timeout, not a final decision. And in many cases, the space he creates is the very space that allows him to realize what he actually wants, and who he risks losing if he stays distant for too long. You said, sometimes his silence is a signal you need to pay attention to. But not all silence means the same thing. Understanding the difference between when he's testing the connection and when his silence is a genuine red flag can completely change the way you respond. Many women assume any pause in communication is a sign of fading interest, but men often use silence as a way to read the relationship. When it's a test, he's usually watching your reaction without even realizing he's doing it. He wants to see whether you'll panic, chase, or lose your sense of self. If you react emotionally or urgently, he interprets that as pressure. If you stay grounded, confident, and unshaken, his respect and interest increase, because you're showing emotional stability instead of emotional dependence. A test-based silence usually comes after a moment of connection, vulnerability, or closeness. If he pulled away right after you two had a great time or a deep conversation, he may be subconsciously checking how secure the dynamic is. In this case, he still thinks about you, still cares, and still intends to return. His silence is a temporary retreat, not a disappearance. When he emerges, he comes back curious, warm, and more engaged. A red flag silence, however, feels different. The energy shifts, not just the communication. You notice that he's not only quiet, he's disengaged. Messages feel flat or forced when he does respond. His interest drops, his effort fades, and you no longer feel his presence in the connection. Red flag silence usually happens when he's losing emotional investment, exploring other options, or avoiding accountability. Instead of trying to process feelings, he's trying to avoid confrontation or responsibility. Another red flag is inconsistency. If he disappears and reappears only when it benefits him, when he's bored, lonely, or in need of validation, his silence isn't a test, it's a pattern, a cycle, a behavior that shows he values the convenience more than the connection. The key difference is simple. A test makes him return with intention, but a red flag leaves you feeling uncertain, drained, and undervalued. When his silence is a test, your calm confidence draws him back. When his silence is a red flag, your boundaries reveal the truth. You said, when a man begins to pull away, many women slip into behaviors that feel natural in the moment, but unintentionally drive him even farther. It's not because they're doing anything wrong. It's because the fear of losing the connection triggers an emotional response that men interpret very differently. What feels like care or clarity to you often feels like pressure or pursuit to him. And once he senses pressure, he retreats even more. One common mistake is over-communicating. Sending long messages, asking for explanations, or trying to talk through every detail may feel like the best way to fix the problem. But to a man who's already overwhelmed, this kind of intensity makes him feel cornered. Instead of hearing your concern, he feels your urgency, and urgency can be suffocating when he's already in retreat mode. Another way women accidentally push men away is by shifting their energy. When insecurity kicks in, you might start monitoring his replies, adjusting your mood to match his responses, or becoming hyper-aware of every small change. The moment he senses that his actions control your emotions, he subconsciously loses respect for the dynamic. Attraction fades when he feels that you're centering the relationship around his behavior rather than your own life. Trying to win him back also pushes him away. This can look like being overly accommodating, lowering your boundaries, agreeing to things you're not comfortable with, or trying to appear more available to keep him from losing interest. Instead of drawing him closer, this tells him he doesn't need to step up. When he sees you shrinking your needs to fit his comfort, he stops seeing you as someone with strong inner value. Another accidental mistake is reacting emotionally, crying, confronting, accusing, or expressing panic when he goes quiet. Your feelings are valid, but when your emotions become the center of the conversation, he feels responsible for them, which creates pressure. The heavier the emotional weight, the more distance he instinctively creates. Overthinking also becomes a silent repellent. When you start replaying scenarios, questioning his intentions, or assuming he's losing interest, your energy becomes anxious. Men may not articulate it, but they can feel that shift. Anxiety creates tension. Tension makes him withdraw. Ultimately, the biggest way women push men away is by abandoning their self-worth the moment silence appears. When you start chasing instead of leaning back, when you try to fill the gap instead of letting him notice it, you reverse the polarity that made him attracted to you in the first place. Your power isn't in your pursuit, it's in your presence and in your willingness to stay grounded even when he pulls away. You said, the turning point in any connection where a man has gone quiet is not about what you say to him, it's about the shift you make within yourself. Most women try to solve the distance by increasing effort, but the shift that actually makes him reach out comes from reducing emotional pressure, reclaiming your value, and changing the energy he feels from you. This shift isn't about manipulation, it's about alignment. When a man pulls away, the dynamic becomes unbalanced because you begin operating from fear while he operates from space. To reverse this, you must step out of fear and back into self-assuredness. The first part of the shift is emotional detachment, not from him, but from the outcome. When you stop gripping the situation and start focusing on your own emotional center, your energy becomes lighter, calmer, and more magnetic. Men are highly sensitive to emotional tone. They often return when they stop feeling responsibility for your emotions and start feeling curiosity again. Curiosity grows in silence, but only if the silence isn't filled by your pursuit. Another part of this shift is reactivating your own life. When he senses that his withdrawal does not pull you out of your world, your goals, your hobbies, your friendships, he's reminded that you are someone valuable with or without his attention. This is where the polarity switches. Instead of him feeling like you're waiting for him, he begins to feel like he's missing out on you. Your independence triggers his instinct to re-engage because men pursue what they sense they could lose. The third component is emotional consistency. Instead of reacting to his silence, you maintain the same calm, grounded presence you showed from the beginning. No panicked messages, no subtle guilt, no passive-aggressive hints, just steady, confident energy. This is the place where men feel safest coming back because they know they won't walk into chaos. You also subtly shift the dynamic by valuing your boundaries. You stop explaining your worth, defending your feelings, or trying to convince him to show up. When you embody the belief that you deserve effort, reciprocity, and communication, he's drawn to meet you at that level. Men step up when they sense a woman who will not step down. This shift is powerful because it changes the emotional landscape. Instead of him feeling overwhelmed or responsible, he begins to feel drawn in. He feels your absence, not your pressure. He feels your value, not your fear. And it's that combination, space, self-assurance, and emotional steadiness, that makes him reach out, not out of obligation, but desire. The magnetic pause technique is the moment where everything shifts in your favor. Not because you chase him, but because you stop. Not in a passive-aggressive way, not in a silent treatment way, but in a grounded, intentional way that changes the emotional energy between you. Most people misunderstand pause as distance, but a magnetic pause is different. It's not withdrawal, it's recalibration. It's the moment when you remove your emotional pressure from the connection and give both sides enough space for the truth to rise to the surface. Men respond deeply to this because it allows them to feel your absence without feeling punished by it. This technique starts with a simple principle. Stop reacting to his silence and start responding to your own emotional needs instead. When he goes quiet, the instinct is to fill the space, send another message, ask if everything's okay, or try to reconnect the moment you feel uncertainty. But the magnetic pause is the opposite. You stop reaching out, you stop seeking clarity from him. You let the silence exist without rushing to resolve it. This creates a shift inside you that he can feel even without contact. During the pause, you return your attention to your own life, not in a performative way, not posting "look how happy I am without you" stories, but in a genuine return to yourself. You re-engage with what lights you up, your routines, your interests, your plans. This is the phase where he subconsciously senses that your energy is no longer leaning toward him. The availability he once felt from you begins to fade, and that absence sparks curiosity, reflection, and often a surprising wave of longing. The magic of the magnetic pause is that it works because it's authentic. When you stop trying to manage the outcome, your energy softens. You become the opposite of pressure. You become peace. And men are drawn to peace far more powerfully than they are driven by urgency. The pause isn't about pretending not to care. It's about remembering that you're not waiting on anyone to confirm your worth. As the pause continues, he begins to feel the contrast between how the connection felt when you were fully present and how it feels without your warmth, consistency, and emotional presence. That contrast is what pulls him back. Not guilt, not fear, not need, but recognition. He reaches out because he realizes something valuable has gone quiet, and he wants to feel it again. That is the magnetic power of the pause. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't force, it invites. And it's often the moment he decides to come toward you on his own. When he finally messages you after days or even longer of silence, the instinct is often to either demand answers or pretend nothing happened. But neither of these approaches creates the dynamic you want. The goal isn't to punish him or reward him. It's to reset the tone of the connection so he feels safe, intrigued, and motivated to show up with more consistency. What you say in this moment plays a major role in what happens next, and the key is to respond in a way that's calm, confident, and emotionally grounded. The first rule: don't mirror his silence with coldness, and don't mirror your anxiety with over-explanation. If you come in too hot, "Where have you been?" or "I don't deserve this," he feels attacked and retreats again. If you come in too eager, "Hey, I missed you so much," he feels the pressure return and instinctively leans back. Your response should be neutral warmth. Light, composed, steady. Something that shows that you're receptive but not reliant. A simple response like "Hey, good to hear from you" is powerful because it acknowledges him without amplifying the moment. It signals that you're not upset, not desperate, and not waiting by your phone. If he asks how you've been, answer honestly but casually, "I've been good, just keeping busy with a few things." This reinforces the magnetic energy you created during the pause. You are living your life, not orbiting his. Another important element is not immediately asking where he's been or why he disappeared. If he offers an explanation on his own, great, listen, be gracious, but don't interrogate. If he doesn't, that's also telling. You'll get more clarity from observing his effort moving forward than from any explanation he gives now. Men often come back more consistent when they feel they're entering a stable, inviting space rather than a courtroom. When the conversation begins to open up, match his tone but don't overinvest. Keep your responses thoughtful but not overly long. Show interest without overextending. The idea is to allow him to step back into the connection at a pace that feels natural, while demonstrating that you no longer carry emotional intensity around the silence. If he wants to make plans, say yes, only if you genuinely want to. If he hints at reconnecting more, let him lead that effort for a little while. Your job isn't to make him stay, it's to allow him to choose you freely. What you say when he reaches out should reflect your worth, your calm, and your confidence. That's what keeps him leaning in instead of pulling away again. You said, breaking the cycle of him pulling away, you panicking, and then both of you falling into the same emotional loop requires more than just reacting differently. It requires understanding your patterns, reinforcing your boundaries, and building emotional habits that prevent the dynamic from repeating. Men don't stop this pattern because you ask them to. They stop when the relationship dynamic no longer supports the push-pull rhythm in the first place. And that begins with you shifting how you respond to distance, communication drops, or emotional inconsistency. The first step is learning to regulate your emotional triggers. When he goes quiet, your mind fills the gap with stories, usually negative ones. You assume he's losing interest, replacing you, or evaluating your worth. These fears create anxiety, and anxiety drives the behaviors that push him even further. To stop the pattern, you have to slow down the story your mind tells. Notice the fear, ground yourself, and choose not to act from panic. When you stay emotionally steady, the whole dynamic changes. The second step is upholding consistent boundaries. Not the kind where you threaten to walk away, but the kind where you protect your emotional well-being without drama. If someone's effort drops, your effort naturally balances. If communication fades, you don't chase. If he disappears for days, you don't reward the absence with over-availability when he returns. You're not punishing him, you're simply matching energy in a healthy, self-preserving way. Next, cultivate a life so full, so grounded, and so meaningful that a man pulling away no longer destabilizes you. When your world doesn't revolve around his presence, he feels less power over your emotional state. That alone shifts the dynamic. You become someone who engages out of desire, not fear. Someone who stays because she chooses to, not because she's afraid of losing connection. This is where men step up naturally, because the relationship becomes a privilege, not a responsibility. Another vital step is recognizing patterns early. If he pulls away consistently, reappears only when convenient, or shows no accountability for his disappearances, this isn't a psychological retreat, it's misalignment. In those moments, stopping the pattern forever may mean stopping the relationship. Your standards must matter as much as your feelings. Finally, you break the cycle by choosing a new response every time the old emotion arises. When he distances, you don't collapse, you recalibrate. When he returns, you don't overextend, you stay steady. When uncertainty appears, you don't cling, you anchor into your value. This is how the pattern ends, not by controlling him, but by changing what you allow, accept, and emotionally absorb. The moment you commit to that, the cycle can't continue, because you're no longer participating in it. The journey of understanding why he goes silent and how to respond isn't just about making him reach out, it's about reclaiming your own power, confidence, and emotional clarity. By now you've learned that his silence doesn't define your worth, that chasing or panicking only fuels the push-pull dynamic, and that the real influence comes from how you hold yourself in the face of uncertainty. What matters most is the energy you project, the boundaries you maintain, and the consistency with which you honor your value. The next step is integration. It's not enough to understand these concepts. You must practice them in real life. Every time he pulls away, you have an opportunity to reinforce the pattern you want: calmness, self-assurance, and independence. This is where transformation happens. The magnetic pause, the grounded responses, and the awareness of red flags versus tests all work together to create a relationship dynamic that is healthy, respectful, and balanced. Remember, the goal isn't to manipulate him into reaching out. It's to create an environment where he chooses to return because he feels drawn, not pressured. You want a connection based on mutual interest, respect, and attraction, not fear, guilt, or obligation. Finally, focus on yourself. Invest in your growth, your passions, and your emotional resilience. The stronger you become in your own life, the less impact his silence will have, and the more likely he is to step up naturally. Every step you take towards self-mastery also strengthens your relationships and ensures that the cycle of frustration and chasing ends. So take a deep breath, trust the process, and commit to your own value. The tools you've learned today aren't just for moments of silence. They're for building a connection where you are always respected, desired, and in control of your emotional world. Your next move isn't reactive. It's deliberate, empowered, and confident.